Greetings, friends. Shabbat Shalom. We're here at the conclusion of the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, the 10 days that we set our lives. Remember Leviticus 23:24. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the first of the month, you shall have a ceasing, a commemoration with horn blasting, a holy assembly. You shall not do any work. Well, we got together last week and we observed that day of horn blasting on the first day of the 7th month. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the 10th of this 7th month, it is the day of atonement. You shall have a holy assembly, and you shall degrade yourselves. You shall bring forward an offering by fire to the Lord. Af bashor l'chodesh hashavi'i chazeh Yom Kippurim. Now we are here at the 10th day of the Day of Atonement. We have a pretty good idea of what atonement means to us. But that's how we translate it. In Hebrew, it actually means day of cleansing. So if you can cleanse yourself of one thing and one thing only, what would it be? Now, yes, in English, it's much cooler because atonement can become at one-ment, because it is a very at one time. It is you and only you connected to the entire cosmic consciousness. We understand it to be amends, reparation, reconciliation, all personal, internal things. It is all those and it is none of those. And it is none because none of those call for the one thing I want you to exhibit. And exhibit it for only one thing if possible. Friends, you must feel it. If you find it in your heart, can I be forgiven? Guess I owe you some kind of apology. I've escaped death so many times. I know I'm only living by the saving grace that's over me. Now for many, this Day of Atonement, with its possible 6 or 7 hour prayer service, it's just done by rote. You just sit there, you read, you don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's not from the heart, but real forgiveness, both the seeking and granting, comes from the heart. The instructions we were given, we were told to degrade ourselves, which is the same term that's used for what the Egyptians did. It suggests that on the Day of Atonement, one is to be hard on oneself. And so we have interpreted this to mean we are not to give care to making, ourselves look attractive or materially successful. It's also understood to include fasting. But as time change, how you degrade yourself has to change too. Hey, if you practice intermittent fasting, which many do, perhaps the fasting's not so bad. Treat it like Lent, a time of penitence. Pick one thing to give up, something that you would suffer from in not having or doing. Now, maybe avoid your social media posting for a day. Each of you has one thing that you just don't want to lose. Chocolate, cookies, cigarettes, anger. Lose it for a day. Just one day. The Israelites, those who struggle with God, were degraded for 400 years. What's a day? Now, is that atoning? No. It may fulfill the obligation of degrading, but that's only so you can focus on what you need to focus on. Focus on your feelings. On Rosh Hashanah, we were inscribed in the Book of Life. We were told to hear the wake-up call, smell the roses, realize where we were, what we were, who we were, where we are going. And most importantly, did we like what we see? If not, we could change it. We were in complete balance. We could become another person, perhaps a better person. We could return to the path of who we were meant to be. Now we have a chance to take all that we've done over these last 10 days and using the ancient mechanism that allows us to return to perfection, we can ask for and grant forgiveness. This, my friends, is Yom Kippur, a day of lot casting, which coincidentally is the Torah portion that's read, the one about the most fascinating sacrifice of ancient biblical times. Although I think instead it should be called a day of cleansing, because that's really what it translates as. And we do that by the employment of the forgiveness mechanism. It's so important and so overlooked. We can be so haunted by the mistakes and regrets of our lives, but we always feel better when we seek or grant forgiveness. Find it in your heart to seek and to grant forgiveness. So welcome everybody to this house of spirit, Beth Ruach. We're all equal. So once again, please do go ahead. Invite everybody you know, physically, digitally, psychically, emotionally, or spiritually, to gather and share. From Psalm 133, the Hinei Matov, come together. Hinei Matov. Hinei Matov. How good, how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters together. Community. Community. Unity. Together. So as a community, let's all spread love, goodwill, and fellowship to the world. It applies to everybody. Even the Shabbos Goy you thought was there to serve. Well, we all grew up being taught we are forbidden to eat, drink, bathe, anoint ourselves, wear shoes, have sexual relations on this day of Yom Kippur. But that's rabbinic tradition, not Torah. The rabbinic belief is take pleasurable things away to degrade ourselves. 10 days ago, we wiped the slate clean. We started again. We ate an apple dipped in honey. The apple represented the knowledge we gained from the Garden of Eden, the great gift of knowing what is good and what is evil. And even knowing, many of us chose evil and not good. Now, honey's for a sweet life, and believe it or not, you're entitled to a sweet life. And usually it's only you who denies yourself that right. But now we're at the end of this 10 days, where you search your soul for any negatives you've done and you seek forgiveness for them. There's 3 categories. First, from any individual you may have harmed. Okay. Second, for anything you've done to this great universe and home we all share, and you seek that forgiveness from God. And finally, from the harshest judge of all, yourself, the things you have done that you kick yourself over. And remember, my friends, it's not your words and deeds as much as it is your intentions, your kavanah. Even though no one else but you and God knows what they were. This is the way we are going to be celebrating Yom Kippur this year. As you feel the power of forgiveness, you will find this is a perfect time to invoke blessings and healing and renewal for everyone everywhere, and truly feel it and mean it. For everybody you know. For the souls and spirits of everybody you know. So think of whoever now. Focus on them. Call their names. It's not just for people. It's for our pets. It's for the earth. It is the healing of the world. The tikkun olam that's part of our spiritual genetic makeup. Friends, the world is a work in progress, which is why we are obliged to fix it by fixing ourselves. That's the real meaning of tikkun olam. Let's send some renewal, some healing, some goodwill. For Roseanne and Kevin, for Alex, for Snoopy, for Tally, for Dave, for Mary, for Aurelia, for Eden, for Terry, for James, for Lori, for Susan and Edgar, for the bee, for everyone the world over. Friends, it is the kindness, healing, wishes, goodwill, and love we all send out. It just circles the world, finding those in need. So thank you, each of you, for all you do, for all you care, because the world is a world of spirit, and spirit, my friends, never dies. Avotenu Makor Habracha Limotenu. May the source of strength bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage. Make our lives a blessing. The renewal of body. The renewal of spirit. Let us say, Amen. Yishaberach, let us all have our spirits renewed. This is the great prayer for healing, which we call upon God to heal as He is healed. Before me, Yishaberach, may He who blessed, because all healing is a blessing. Let's all send and receive healing and renewal energy in our efforts to love, to share, to care, to grow. Now, the sacred book we've been reading, the Torah, the first part of the Bible, ends without a conclusion. It's not a history. It's a forever tale where we each see our promised land just there, just over the horizon, and we take steps ourselves to enter it. The best step we can take is to find forgiveness. Like I say, that takes true feeling. We rarely notice how insulated we can make our feelings. Perhaps so much so that you've encased yourself in a hard diamond-like substance. And if you have, it was to protect what you instinctively saw as the most vulnerable part of your being. Through retrospection and introspection, through self-discovery, you've used the time of judgment to see your real self as actually the divine image of you. And you can do what you need to get yourself back on that path. We have the ability to reconnect to the universal flow of energy that binds us all together. Kippur comes from the word for cleansing. We glide through a waterfall. We are dark, dirty, with the years or a lifetime's malfeasance. We are cleansed. This is the day of our cleansing. This holiest of holy days begins the night before, when we gather and recite a prayer which did not become a significant part of the liturgy until the 15th century, because it allowed the conversos, those Spanish and Portuguese Jews forced to convert during the Spanish Inquisition, to annul the vows of conversion. The kol nidre, meaning all vows, is the annulment of vows. We ask God to release us from any vows that we may have forgotten, made inappropriately, or been unable to fulfill in the previous year. It's actually a much more recent addition to traditional liturgy that people realize. It was not always welcomed into the service by many rabbinic authorities, and it was actually expunged from Western prayer books during, up through and including the 19th century. It comes from the verb nazir, to vow. And we read about that verb when we read about the Nazirite vow, that special priestly vow. And we heard about the two most famous Nazirites, Samson and Jesus. Now, formally, Kol Nidre is chanted 3 times in increasing volume. It's become an incredibly powerful piece of Jewish liturgy, in the 20th century. And there's so many fantastic versions of it available on the internet, and I encourage you to, go and listen to some. And there was a fascinating change to the wording that took place by the great commentator Rashi's son-in-law, Rabbi Meir ben Shmuel, who changed the phrase from the last day of atonement until this one to from this day of atonement until the next. And therefore he changed the nature of the prayer, and it's not really a prayer, it's really a legal covenant, from one concerned with unfulfilled obligations of the past to one of vows which one may not be able to fulfill or observe in the future. And you will often hear it sung both ways. Kol Nidre Va'es Arei Ushvuei Baharamei V'konamei V'kinusei V'chinuei Didana Dishtabena Acharina Udasana Al Nafshatana Yom Kippurim Zad Yom Kippurim Habalenu L'tova. Now the message is quite clear. Beware what you vow or promise. Your word is a palpable entity. All vows, oaths, prohibitions, and promises, which we made to God, were not able to fulfill. From last Yom Kippur to this Yom Kippur, or from this Yom Kippur to the next. May all such vows between ourselves and God be annulled. May they be void and of no effect. May we be absolved of them and released from them. May these vows not be considered vows. These oaths not be considered oaths. These promises not be considered promises. Friends, stop giving energy to your self-defeating attitudes by saying to yourself, I now release all bitterness and disappointments with the world. I now release hardening my heart against suffering. We can become life-affirming rather than controlled and constricted. We can discover that life is not always grim and serious. Happiness is a legitimate response to existence today. Can you find moments of pure happiness? I guarantee you can. We can learn to identify with others rather than against them, realizing that others are not unlike ourselves and therefore worthy of the same rights and privileges. We can relate to others as individuals and equals. When we see ourselves as we really are, we're exhibiting a lot of courage. And for real change to occur, you will always need awareness, dedication, perseverance. How much are you really interested in these things? To change, you have to be. We are told how solemn, self-judging, full of confessions, some real and some not, how self-condemning this day is. Do not make that the meaning of the day. The vows you make between you and God are different vows than the vows you make with people. The meaning is how you move the needle of decency just a little more to the positive. The Talmud says a man should always consider himself evenly balanced, half sinful, half righteous. If he commits one good, he's tilted the scales towards righteousness. If he commits one sin, he has tilted the scales towards sinfulness. Friends, do not get weighed down by the lifetime of choices you've made. Look at each choice you make by itself, because it is never too late to alter the balance of those scales. Thoughts are things, and what you think more than what you say or do tilt those scales one way or the other. The great scholar Maimonides told us a fundamental tenet of Judaism is there is always an opportunity to repent, to return to God. A person has the ability to rectify his wrongdoings with teshuvah. Now it's translated as repentance, but its real meaning, of course, is return. Use the opportunity to return to the path you were meant to be on. That's what this day is about. Only you will see where it is. Be sincere in your desire and your attempt. Now, while this terrible expression, if I offended, then please accept my apology, is considered legally a fulfillment of the requirement, it is woefully short of the halakhic intent of what this day is about. For this year, I want you to do something different. I want you to focus on you. I want you to take the confession, the vidui prayer, the most important prayer of the day, seriously. It is the confessions of sin, but don't state them. Ask. Ask yourself those 42 questions of the assessors and see if there are any that you really need to stand in judgment for. Now, I personally think this is the oldest prayer in Judaism, and I believe it may very well be the first one written down. And we all know it. For the sin which we have committed before you by hard-heartedness, for the sin which we have committed before you inadvertently, for the sin which we have committed before you with the utterance of the lips, for the sin which we have committed before you with immorality, for the sin which we have committed before you openly or secretly, for the sin which we have committed before you with knowledge and with deceit, for the sin which we have committed before you through speech, on and on as we pound our chest with each utterance. We have sinned knowingly, we have eaten forbidden food, we have robbed, we have been arrogant, we've caused corruption, injustice, iniquity. We have extorted, exploited other people. We took things which do not belong to us. We have been jealous and envious. We were not grateful, happy, and satisfied. These originated as questions. These were questions we had to answer. Did you eat food forbidden to you? Did you rob? Were you arrogant? These were questions, not statements. When it's a question, you actually have to answer it. Now, you've heard me say there must be 3 component parts to asking forgiveness: sincerity, accountability, vulnerability. Sincerity is not in the words you use, but in the authenticity of the emotions you convey. Accountability is not about blaming others, but in taking responsibility for your own actions. Each of us forges our own destiny. And when we are wrong, we need to assume responsibility and make amends, and that is with others, with God, and with ourselves. And remember, forgiveness is a vulnerable experience. It can be embarrassing and awkward. If you lack the courage to expose your flaws, you remain stuck in a quagmire of ego and enslaved by the superficiality of your false sense of self. By speaking the truth, you revel in the full majesty of life. Our growth through the forgiveness process is life-altering because we look at all future incidents differently. Because we think about what we did to upset someone. And if we have difficulty there, we learn to ask, get clarification for what our actions did. We learn to understand what we did and why we did it. So we understand the other people and we understand ourselves better. We learn to empathize because we truly understand how our actions were hurtful to another person. We seek to make things right, to balance those scales. Actions do speak louder than words. We demonstrate the change has occurred. Once a year on Yom Kippur, we are forced to face the mirror of self. We are forced to confront our shortcomings and stand up to them. We are forced to remember. We are forced to question. We are forced to cleanse, to atone. We're given the opportunity to feel regret and remorse and make positive resolutions for the coming year. This yearly introspection